They thought no one would ever see it. They thought their secrets were safe. But late one night, in the glittering shadows of a Mediterranean yacht, a camera caught something that would rock the royal world to its core. A party was in full swing, laughter echoing across the deck, champagne flowing like water, and yet in the corner, hidden from most eyes, two figures exchanged glances that would later haunt them forever. Meghan Markle, Prince Andrew, together, in the same place, at the same time. A moment that had been buried in rumor for years now had proof. And someone, only one person, held the key to revealing it all. Can you imagine the panic? The desperation? Picture being caught in a lie so massive that the world might never look at you the same way again. That was Meghan and Andrew's reality in that moment. And the man holding the evidence wasn't a journalist. He wasn't a tabloid editor. He was Tom Bower, the writer who had built a career exposing secrets that the powerful prayed would remain hidden. The very man Meghan and Andrew feared, and yet, now, the very person they were begging to stay silent. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The footage itself wasn't flashy at first glance. It was subtle, quiet almost, but that's what made it dangerous. A hand lightly brushing against another, a conversation held just a little too long, a glance that said more than words ever could. Anyone not paying attention might have seen nothing, but Bower saw everything, and he knew exactly what it meant. For Meghan, for Andrew, for the image they had painstakingly built for the world. Why does this matter now? Why does a party from years ago suddenly ignite chaos? The answer is simple: timing. The world had nearly forgotten some of the shadows surrounding these figures, but with social media and the relentless pace of 24-hour news, nothing stays buried forever. One leak, one careless post, one slip, and decades of careful image management can unravel in hours. Bower, with decades of experience navigating scandals, understood this better than anyone. And the people in that footage? They were terrified. It's important to remember, Meghan Markle has built an image of grace, intelligence, and strength. The Duchess of Sussex, the woman who overcame obstacles to stand at the pinnacle of modern royalty. But images can lie. Public perception can be carefully curated, while private actions tell a different story entirely. And in this case, the private story, captured on that yacht, was explosive. Prince Andrew, of course, needs little introduction. A prince whose name has been associated with controversy for years, whose public appearances and private choices have often been at odds, now finds himself tied to a new revelation. One that, on the surface, seems innocuous but carries weighty implications. What could possibly connect Meghan Markle, a woman of modern celebrity and influence, to Andrew, a figure whose past has never quite escaped scrutiny? The answer lies not in what they did in public, but in what was hidden, what they hoped would remain unseen. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine being in their shoes. Imagine the dread that must have settled in Meghan's chest as she realized the footage existed. Imagine Andrew's calculations, running through every possible outcome, weighing every risk. The thought alone is enough to send shivers. Because they weren't just worried about embarrassment. This was bigger than headlines. Bigger than gossip columns. This was a threat to carefully constructed narratives, to reputations built over decades, to the very perception of who they were. And the man holding the footage? Bower didn't just have evidence. He had power. The moment someone realizes their secrets are no longer safe, everything changes. Suddenly, the world they knew becomes a minefield. Every ally, every staff member, every former friend could become a liability. Trust erodes, panic sets in. And that's exactly what happened here. Desperation can drive people to unimaginable lengths. And in the months following the emergence of this footage, Meghan and Andrew did exactly that. They reached out. They begged. They tried to negotiate. Every tactic was deployed to prevent the footage from seeing the light of day. But here's the twist. Bower didn't act like a typical journalist. He didn't rush to publish. He didn't leak. He held back. He knew the stakes were enormous, but he also knew the story was far more potent if revealed correctly. And the longer it stayed under wraps, the higher the tension, the greater the stakes. He understood something that Meghan and Andrew perhaps underestimated. Suspense can be more dangerous than revelation. Because while secrets remain hidden, the fear of exposure grows. and fear can drive people to mistakes, costly mistakes. Let's consider the yacht itself. A vessel of luxury, yes, but also a symbol. A place where appearances were everything. Guests mingled, cocktails in hand, laughter masking tension. And yet, in the shadows, connections were being made, alliances subtly tested, loyalties quietly questioned. Bauer, with his camera and his instincts, noticed the patterns. The way Meghan moved, the way Andrew positioned himself, the exchanges that seemed trivial but were loaded with meaning. Every detail mattered, and the footage captured them all. Have you ever noticed how a single glance can tell a story? A fleeting smile, a whispered comment, a hand gesture. Sometimes the smallest actions reveal the most profound truths. In this footage, such moments abound. And while casual observers might miss them, Bauer did not. He pieced together context, history, and behavior, understanding not just what happened, but what it meant. And as he did, a chilling realization set in. This wasn't just a minor scandal. This was a potential earthquake, shaking foundations, reputations, and the carefully curated narratives the royal family relied upon. And what about the people outside the immediate circle? The public, the media, and even close friends of Meghan and Andrew. None knew the footage existed. Imagine the explosion of reactions, the shockwaves if it were to leak. Headlines, social media uproar, endless speculation. The potential for chaos was unimaginable. And that's why the urgency, the panic, the desperation. Because secrets, once captured on camera, have a life of their own. They do not remain dormant. They demand attention, they demand interpretation, and they demand consequences. But here's the most fascinating part. The story isn't just about Meghan and Andrew. It's about power, control, and the lengths people will go to protect themselves. It's about the delicate balance between public image and private reality, about how a single moment, an evening on a yacht, a camera rolling quietly in the shadows, can threaten to unravel decades of careful management. And in that tension lies the drama, the suspense, the emotional pulse that drives this story. Now, ask yourself, what would you do if someone held proof of your most guarded moments? Would you negotiate, threaten, plead, or attempt to charm your way out? Meghan and Andrew's choices, their decisions in the face of exposure, reveal much about their character. And yet, despite their best efforts, some things cannot be controlled. Some truths demand recognition. And the world, as we are about to see, is relentless in its curiosity, unyielding in its scrutiny. This is the beginning of a story that is as much about fear as it is about revelation. It is about the intersection of celebrity, royalty, and secrecy, a volatile mix that has captured public fascination for decades. But here, in this footage, in these images, in these subtle interactions, we find a new layer. Something unexpected. Something that challenges what we thought we knew. Something that will compel Meghan, compel Andrew, and even compel Bauer to confront truths that cannot be ignored. What if I told you that one of the most explosive royal encounters in recent history didn't happen at a palace, a gala, or a press event, but on a yacht? A sleek, sun-drenched vessel gliding across the Mediterranean, seemingly harmless, yet hiding a story that would shake the world. You might be thinking yachts are just for parties, for glamorous photos, for private escapes. But in this case, the yacht was a stage, a trap, and a silent witness to events that would later spark panic, desperation, and scandal. It all began on a warm summer evening. The Mediterranean sun was dipping toward the horizon, painting the water gold and orange, casting long, dramatic shadows across the deck. The guests were a mixture of celebrities, socialites, and influencers, all accustomed to exclusivity and indulgence. Champagne flowed freely, the kind of vintage that costs more than most people earn in a year. Laughter rang out. Music thumped softly from hidden speakers, and everyone was dancing, or at least pretending to. It was a scene that screamed opulence, yet underneath it simmered tension. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then, as Bauer would later piece together, subtle movements told another story. Meghan Markle arrived, her presence calm but deliberate, eyes scanning the deck, measuring the crowd. She wasn't here for small talk or idle chatter. She was here for control, observation, and, perhaps, something more. In another corner, Prince Andrew mingled with the usual suspects, a man whose reputation preceded him, but whose behavior was carefully moderated in public. But here, on this yacht, away from cameras, away from scrutiny, the rules were different. Bauer's footage would later reveal the most astonishing detail. Meghan and Andrew were in the same place, moving in the same circle, yet carefully orchestrating interactions that left little trace for the casual eye. A gentle hand on an arm, a tilt of the head, a whisper barely audible over the music. Each gesture was loaded, each glance deliberate. The camera caught it all. And yet, at the time, no one noticed. It was invisible theater, performed under the guise of luxury and leisure. But here's where it gets truly intriguing. Why were they both there? Their appearances seemed coincidental, but Bauer's meticulous research suggested otherwise. The yacht was rented by a high-profile intermediary, someone skilled in navigating the social world of elites. Invitations were curated, selective, and highly confidential. Only a handful of people knew who would be present. And yet, Meghan and Andrew both appeared, their paths crossing in ways that, on the surface, seemed random, but the reality was far more calculated. Can you imagine the tension in the room if you had been one of the other guests? You sip your champagne, unaware that a secret moment of royal significance is unfolding just meters away. The casual observer might notice a familiar face, a flash of recognition. But for most, it would seem like any ordinary party, a yacht party, after all, was supposed to be glamorous, carefree. But as Bauer's footage would later prove, nothing here was ordinary. Every step, every movement was part of an intricate dance, a choreography of secrecy. The dynamics on the yacht were fascinating. Meghan navigated the deck with a purpose that spoke volumes. She smiled, laughed, and mingled, but her eyes always scanned, always assessed. Andrew, similarly, was aware, calculating, his body language projecting both casual confidence and subtle defensiveness. Two people, aware of one another, yet performing for everyone else. The brilliance, or danger, of this encounter was its subtlety. It could be missed by anyone not paying close attention, but the truth, the story, was there in every fleeting gesture. Now, let's pause and consider the implications. What happens when two high-profile figures with reputations, secrets, and public scrutiny intersect in a private space? Power dynamics shift. Loyalties are tested. Trust is fragile. And, most importantly, every move carries potential consequences. In this case, the yacht was more than a playground. It was a crucible. It was a place where the lines between private and public, reality and perception, could blur, and blur dangerously. What makes this event even more astonishing is that it was almost entirely unplanned, or at least, that's what many would like to believe. Guests later reported that neither Meghan nor Andrew had made announcements. Their appearances were discreet, almost casual, and yet Bauer's camera captured everything. He knew exactly what he was filming, anticipating moments that others would never consider significant. The smallest detail, a hand on a shoulder, a whispered exchange, could carry monumental implications. And here's where the human element comes in. Picture Meghan, navigating the deck with purpose. She is calm, composed, yet inwardly aware of the stakes. Every interaction is a negotiation, every glance a message. Now picture Andrew, experienced in the delicate art of managing public perception, aware that his presence could draw attention, but confident he could control the narrative. Together, their interaction was electric, not in the sense of romance, but in the sense of high-stakes calculation. The tension between them, subtle but undeniable, was captured frame by frame. You might wonder why Bauer even had access to this moment. The answer lies in his investigative genius. He had spent months building trust with sources, learning the movements of the elite social world, understanding the patterns of who attends what events, and, crucially, where cameras could be placed unnoticed. By the time this yacht footage was captured, he was ready. He knew that Meghan and Andrew's interaction, even if quiet and fleeting, could hold explosive revelations. And he was correct. The footage also revealed interactions with other guests. Subtle reactions, hushed conversations, glances that carried unspoken messages. Some guests were aware of the tension, some oblivious. But the camera caught them all, silently documenting behavior that would later be dissected by journalists, analysts, and the public. Every movement was a puzzle piece, and when combined, they formed a narrative more compelling than anyone could have imagined. Here's the thing. Most people see royal scandals in headlines, in courtrooms, or in public statements. They don't imagine the quiet, almost invisible moments that create the conditions for those scandals. A glance, a gesture, a whispered conversation. These are the sparks that ignite the fire. And on this yacht, the sparks were everywhere. The footage would later show Meghan and Andrew exchanging small signs, subtle interactions, that, while innocent to the casual observer, held deep implications in the context of their histories. Now, consider the stakes for Meghan. She had carefully curated an image as the modern, independent, and graceful royal. Every public appearance was meticulously planned, every statement carefully measured. And yet, here, on this yacht, under the subtle gaze of Bauer's camera, there was a glimpse behind the carefully constructed persona. For Andrew, the stakes were equally high. His past controversies were well documented, his public image fragile. To be caught in a private moment with Meghan, in a setting that was supposed to be discreet, was to risk public scrutiny on a new level. Can you feel the tension building? Imagine yourself on that yacht, aware of the cameras, aware of the implications, and trying to maintain composure. Every laugh, every smile, every casual touch is a calculated decision. And as the evening progressed, the subtle exchanges intensified, the interactions more layered, the stakes higher. The night was far from ordinary, and the consequences would ripple outward in ways no one could anticipate. Bauer's footage, however, didn't just capture the present. It hinted at the past and foreshadowed future implications. Observers could see patterns, repeated gestures, consistent strategies, and a sense of mutual understanding between Meghan and Andrew. These weren't random interactions. They were deliberate, meaningful, and, ultimately, dangerous in the wrong hands. And Bauer held those hands. By the time the yacht returned to port, Meghan and Andrew had dispersed, mingled, and acted as if the evening were just another glamorous gathering. But the truth, captured in silent footage, was far more complex. And as Bauer reviewed the tapes later, he realized the magnitude of what he had. This was not just a minor scandal. It was a revelation that could alter perceptions, histories, and reputations. The story, of course, does not end with the yacht docking. In fact, it was only beginning, because the footage existed. And once something like this exists, it has a way of escaping control. Meghan and Andrew would soon discover that desperate measures are often required to protect a secret. What drives a man like Tom Bauer? Some call him relentless. Some call him obsessive. But the truth is simpler. He has an insatiable need to uncover what the powerful hope will remain hidden. And in the case of Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, Bauer's instincts told him that the story on that yacht was just the tip of the iceberg. It all started months before the yacht party even took place. Bauer had been following Andrew's movements, piecing together a pattern of private gatherings, yacht excursions, and exclusive parties. He knew that high-profile figures often operate in silos, insulated from public scrutiny, but never completely beyond observation. His network of insiders, from event planners to yacht staff, had been feeding him fragments of information, sometimes contradictory, sometimes precise, but always intriguing. Bauer's process is methodical. He doesn't rush. He sifts through hundreds of hours of interviews, phone records, and eyewitness accounts. He corroborates every detail, cross-checks every claim, and constructs a timeline so precise it can withstand scrutiny. And when the tip came in about Meghan's attendance at a particular yacht party, alongside Andrew, his curiosity ignited. The yacht itself was an investigator's dream and nightmare. Guests were transient, moving from deck to cabin, from dining area to lounge, often leaving no trace of their interactions. But Bauer had anticipated this. Hidden cameras, discreet observations, and trusted staff gave him eyes where there were supposed to be none. And when Meghan and Andrew appeared, seemingly unaware of the surveillance, Bauer knew he had captured something extraordinary. But Bauer didn't just rely on technology. He relied on human intuition. He understood body language, the subtle cues that reveal intention. A casual hand on a shoulder, a brief, meaningful glance, a smile that hides more than it reveals. In the footage, these nuances were clear. Anyone watching might miss them, But to Bauer, they told a story more compelling than any headline could. What makes this investigation remarkable isn't just the footage, it's the context. Meghan Markle, in the public eye, has always been a master of image. Every move, every word, every smile has been calculated to project poise and confidence. And yet, in private, in a moment captured on that yacht, her behavior suggested a complexity that defied public narratives. Subtle signals, whispered exchanges, fleeting gestures, all documented by Bauer, hinted at a story no one had anticipated. Andrew, of course, is no stranger to controversy. His past has been a minefield of missteps and public scrutiny. Yet, in the yacht footage, he appeared cautious, calculating, and highly aware of perception. He knew the stakes. Every action was deliberate, every movement measured. And when Meghan entered his orbit, even briefly, the dynamic shifted. Two figures. Bauer's team spent weeks analyzing the footage frame by frame. Every gesture, every conversation, every exchange was annotated. They created timelines, cross-referenced with guest lists, and mapped out the interactions. The result was a narrative far more intricate than anyone could have predicted. And it wasn't just about Meghan and Andrew. It was about power, influence, and the unspoken rules that govern those who believe they are untouchable. But here's where the tension ratchets up. Bauer didn't just capture the footage. He understood its potential impact. In the wrong hands, it could devastate reputations. It could ignite media firestorms. It could alter public perception permanently. And he knew that both Meghan and Andrew would stop at nothing to prevent exposure. This was no longer a simple matter of observation. It was now a high-stakes game of strategy, negotiation, and survival. The investigation deepened when Bauer began contacting insiders. Former staff, yacht crew members, and event planners. Many were reluctant to speak, fearing retribution or loss of employment. Others were willing to reveal just enough to confirm suspicions. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Meghan's presence at the party was no coincidence. Andrew's attendance was calculated. The meeting of their paths, seemingly chance, had layers of intention behind it. Think about the audacity of such a gathering. A luxury yacht in international waters, far from the public eye. Influential figures, some notorious, some beloved, all in close proximity. And two of the most scrutinized individuals in recent royal history, Meghan and Andrew, navigating the crowd with purpose, each aware of the other, yet each determined to maintain control over their image. For an observer, this was a psychological chess game, and Bauer had a front-row seat. He also uncovered inconsistencies in the guest accounts. Some claimed they saw nothing unusual. Others hinted at whispered conversations, secretive exchanges, glances that lasted too long. It became clear that what seemed like a simple social gathering was actually a complex network of interactions, with Meghan and Andrew at the center. And the more Bauer dug, the more he realized how carefully orchestrated every detail had been. Now, consider the pressure this put on Meghan and Andrew. Even if they believed their actions were private, the presence of a meticulous investigator meant that nothing remained unseen. Every gesture, every decision, every conversation was now potentially evidence. The stakes were enormous. For Meghan, it meant safeguarding a carefully curated public image. For Andrew, it meant avoiding further damage to an already fragile reputation. And for Bauer, it meant holding power in his hands, a power that could not be ignored. The human element in Bauer's investigation cannot be overstated. He understood psychology. He knew how people behave when they feel observed, when secrets are at risk of exposure. He anticipated reactions, calculated moves, and even predicted mistakes. And as the footage was reviewed repeatedly, it became clear that Meghan and Andrew were not infallible. Their subtle errors, slight hesitations, and micro-expressions revealed cracks in their control, vulnerabilities that would later define the story. What Bauer had captured was more than a moment. It was a narrative, a living document of human behavior under pressure. It was evidence that could shift public perception, influence media coverage, and challenge the carefully constructed narratives of two high-profile figures. And yet, Bauer remained patient. He did not rush to reveal the footage. He knew that timing was critical. The story's power lay not only in the images themselves, but in how, when, and why they would eventually surface. The investigation also revealed something unexpected: Meghan and Andrew's awareness of observation. Bauer noted subtle signals, eye contact, gestures, positioning, that suggested they had an understanding of potential surveillance. Yet, even with caution, they could not anticipate every angle, every hidden camera, every investigative eye. This awareness, combined with human error, created moments of revelation captured perfectly in the footage. And so, Bauer's investigation deepened. It became a game of observation, deduction, and patience. Every new piece of information added layers of context, allowing him to construct a comprehensive picture of events on the yacht. Every frame of footage, every guest testimony, every subtle interaction contributed to a story more intricate than anyone could have predicted. But here's the final twist. Meghan and Andrew were aware that someone, somewhere, might be watching. They had their strategies, their plans, their methods to maintain control. And yet, Bauer's investigation proved that even the most carefully guarded moments can be captured, documented, and analyzed. And once that happens, once the evidence exists, the game changes. The stakes rise, the players panic, and the consequences ripple outward in ways no one could foresee. By the end of his investigation, Bauer had a full understanding of the event, not just who was present, but what each interaction implied, the motivations behind gestures, the hidden intentions in conversations. He knew the story's explosive potential, and somewhere, Meghan and Andrew were beginning to realize just how much power he now held over their narrative. The investigation was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Because once evidence like this exists, it cannot remain dormant forever. And when Meghan and Andrew learned what Bauer had, their desperation would begin, and it would lead to actions that shocked even the most seasoned observers. What would you do if you realized a secret you thought was safe had been exposed, even partially? For Meghan Markle, the answer was clear: act fast, act decisively, and do whatever it took to regain control. But the situation she faced was unlike anything in her public life. The leaked yacht footage was quiet, subtle, almost invisible to casual eyes, but to someone like Tom Bauer, it spoke volumes. And Meghan knew, the moment she learned of its existence, that the world could soon see what had been hidden for years. Her first move was calculated. Meghan reached out, not publicly, not through intermediaries most would expect, but privately, carefully, to assess the situation. She contacted lawyers, advisors, and, crucially, people within her inner circle who could offer intelligence on Bauer's intentions. Every step was about control. Every conversation was a test of loyalty and discretion. But there was also panic beneath the surface. Because she understood the stakes. This wasn't just a potential embarrassment. This was a story that could challenge the very narrative she had worked tirelessly to craft. The poised, graceful, intelligent royal who overcame adversity. Bauer, of course, was aware that Meghan would act. That was part of his strategy. But Meghan's moves were fascinating to observe. Unlike others in her position, she didn't lash out publicly or threaten legal action immediately. Instead, she probed, she tested, she tried to gauge Bauer's intentions. Every message she sent, every call she made, was calculated to elicit information. The footage existed. Bauer had it. But could she influence what he did next? Could she steer the narrative before it spiraled out of control? To understand her strategy, we need to examine Meghan's history. She is a woman accustomed to navigating complex social and political landscapes. Every interaction in her public life is deliberate. Every appearance is choreographed to some extent. But private life, this was the arena where stakes were personal and deeply consequential. On the yacht, her behavior had been subtle, controlled, and strategic. Now, months later, she faced the consequences of being observed in a setting where she thought control was absolute. And for someone like Meghan, control is everything. Her advisors advised caution. They warned her that Bauer was relentless, that once evidence existed, it could never be fully contained. But Meghan had a reputation for assertive action. She didn't want to negotiate from a position of weakness. So her secret moves began. She reached out to intermediaries who had connections to Bauer's network, attempting to discover what he had, how he intended to use it, and whether there was room to influence the story before it reached public eyes. Every message, every call, every subtle inquiry was designed to gain insight and, if possible, leverage. But there was a problem. Bauer wasn't easily influenced. His career is built on exposing truths that the powerful want to hide. Bribery, threats, or manipulation rarely work. He understands human nature. He understands desperation, and he understands how much a single revelation can disrupt the lives of those involved. And Meghan, for all her intelligence and resources, was about to discover that sometimes even the most calculated moves can have unforeseen consequences. Meanwhile, the footage itself became a silent player in the unfolding drama. Every glance, every gesture, every interaction Meghan had on that yacht was now an invisible force shaping her decisions. The footage showed her maneuvering carefully, maintaining poise, but also revealing subtle cues, nervous tics, slight hesitations, the occasional glance that betrayed awareness of scrutiny. These details would later become significant, revealing cracks in the image she had meticulously built. At the same time, Meghan had to consider public perception. The story could leak at any moment. Social media can explode overnight. A minor detail can become a global scandal. Headlines are unforgiving, and once the narrative is set, it's nearly impossible to control. So while Meghan worked behind the scenes to manage the situation, she also needed to prepare for potential fallout. She instructed her team to craft contingency plans, potential statements, narratives, and defenses ready to deploy the instant the story surfaced. Her secret moves weren't limited to strategy. They extended to alliances. Meghan reached out to mutual acquaintances, people who had influence over narratives, hoping to gather intelligence or sway opinions. She tested loyalties and gauged reactions. Each conversation was a chess move, intended to place her in a position of strength. But there was also risk. Every move she made could be interpreted, recorded, or even misused. In a world where information travels faster than loyalty, every step required precision. And then there was Andrew. Meghan had to navigate his presence in the story carefully. His history and public controversies added layers of complexity. Any connection to him, however innocent or subtle, could amplify the scrutiny. Meghan's moves had to account not just for her own image, but for the perception of association. She needed to distance herself in some ways, yet manage interactions with him subtly, in private, without drawing attention. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required psychological acumen and strategic foresight. Consider the psychological pressure. Imagine knowing that a silent observer captured every nuanced movement, every slight reaction, every unguarded moment. Imagine the knowledge that someone outside your control could expose these moments at any time. Meghan, in this scenario, was operating under immense stress, yet she maintained outward composure. She orchestrated private communications, reviewed potential leaks, and calculated the best steps to maintain control over what could soon become public. Bauer, meanwhile, watched quietly. He understood Meghan's methods, anticipated her moves, and observed the interplay of desperation and strategy. To him, the unfolding drama was as fascinating as the footage itself. The contrast between public image and private behavior, between calculated moves and genuine human emotion, created a story far richer than any simple headline. Every message Meghan sent, every discreet call she made, every subtle attempt to influence outcomes, all of it was documented, either directly or indirectly. The situation escalated when Meghan realized the limitations of indirect influence. Bauer's reputation, experience, and access meant that traditional attempts at persuasion, legal threats, subtle pressure, or negotiation might not suffice. She had to adapt, intensify her efforts, and consider more direct approaches. Her secret moves became bolder, riskier, and more immediate. She understood that hesitation could allow the story to slip from her control entirely. But despite her intelligence and resourcefulness, Meghan was facing forces beyond her full command. The combination of Bauer's meticulous observation, the high stakes of public perception, and the subtle but undeniable power of the yacht footage created a scenario where any misstep could be catastrophic. The pressure was immense. Every move was a gamble. And yet, Meghan pressed on, driven by the need to control the narrative, protect her image, and limit potential fallout. Every investigator, advisor, and strategist knows that desperation can be as revealing as truth itself. Meghan's secret moves, while calculated, also betrayed a sense of urgency and vulnerability. And it's in those moments, between careful planning and instinctive reaction, that the drama truly unfolds. Because even the most disciplined individuals reveal their humanity when stakes are high. By the end of this phase, Meghan had mobilized every available resource, communicated with every ally she could trust, and begun the delicate task of negotiating the unknown. She understood the gravity of the situation. She understood the power Bauer held. And she understood that the next steps she took could shape not just the story of that yacht, but the trajectory of her public and private life for years to come. Imagine standing in the shadows of a story you know could destroy everything you've built. That was Prince Andrew's position, caught between careful calculation and unavoidable exposure. While Meghan Markle orchestrated her secret moves with precision and purpose, Andrew operated differently. His approach was shaped by decades of navigating high-stakes scandals, learning the hard way that even the most private moments can resurface with catastrophic consequences. And yet, on that yacht, under the watchful eyes of Tom Bauer, his actions would speak louder than words. Andrew had always been an enigmatic figure. Publicly, he projects confidence and a certain casual charm. Privately, he is strategic, aware, and capable of subtle manipulation. But the yacht encounter with Meghan added an entirely new layer of complexity. This was not a public appearance where optics could be controlled. This was an environment devoid of cameras, except for one, hidden and meticulously placed by Bauer. Every move Andrew made, every gesture he thought was discreet, was documented. And he knew it, or at least he suspected. To understand Andrew's role, you have to understand his history. This is a man who has navigated controversy and survived it, but never without consequences. He understands scrutiny better than most, understands how quickly a narrative can shift, and knows the value of secrecy. The yacht party was supposed to be a calculated risk, a private gathering among the elite where appearances mattered little and alliances could be tested quietly. Andrew entered with that mindset. But there's a critical distinction between planning for public scrutiny and anticipating a meticulous investigator like Bauer. Andrew, accustomed to managing his public image through advisors, PR teams, and selective appearances, found himself in an arena where traditional controls did not apply. Bauer's camera captured nuances that Andrew could not account for, gestures, interactions, and moments that, while subtle, could be explosive once analyzed. During the party, Andrew's movements were deliberate yet understated. He mingled with key guests, subtly observed the behavior of those around him, and positioned himself in ways that projected calm authority. But there was an undercurrent of tension, a sense that the evening was more than a casual gathering. His glances often drifted toward Meghan, his awareness of her presence both calculated and cautious. Each exchange, though brief and almost imperceptible, carried layers of meaning. And Bauer captured every one of them. Andrew's role, in many ways, was reactive as well as proactive. He monitored Meghan's interactions, gauging her intentions and strategies. He knew that her reputation, carefully curated in public view, could influence perceptions of him by association. Every whisper, every smile, every subtle nod between them could be dissected later for implications. Andrew's objective was to manage the optics in real time, even in a setting that offered no official oversight. Yet, for all his experience, Andrew faced vulnerabilities. He has a long history of public controversies that amplify any association with scandal. Even minor missteps could escalate when connected to figures like Meghan, who carries her own global influence and media attention. The yacht, meant to be a discreet setting, became a crucible where past reputations, present calculations, and future risks collided. Bauer's footage revealed Andrew's behavior in stark clarity. There were moments where his posture betrayed tension, subtle fidgeting that might have gone unnoticed in casual observation. There were interactions with staff and other guests that suggested an awareness of being observed, a conscious effort to maintain control in unpredictable circumstances. These details, invisible to the untrained eye, became critical evidence of strategy and vulnerability. One of the most intriguing aspects of Andrew's behavior was how he navigated private interactions with Meghan. Publicly, he had no association with her. Privately, their paths intersected with nuanced subtlety. Gestures that seemed inconsequential, leaning slightly closer, a hand lightly brushing an object, a whisper carried just beyond the casual range, were captured by Bauer and later analyzed for implications. These interactions suggested not just awareness but coordination, or at least careful management of presence and perception. Andrew also had to account for the unpredictable variables of a social environment. Guests at such parties are often unpredictable. Personal histories, rumors, hidden agendas, and spontaneous behaviors create a complex web of potential risks. Andrew's experience taught him to anticipate outcomes, to project calm, and to manipulate perception subtly. On that yacht, he employed every skill in his arsenal, knowing that a single lapse could be catastrophic. And yet, despite his expertise, Andrew could not control Bauer. The journalist's meticulous planning, hidden cameras, and analytic skills meant that every nuance was recorded, every gesture documented. Andrew, like Meghan, faced the realization that someone outside their control now held power over their narrative. It was a sobering position, one that required immediate strategic consideration. By the end of the evening, Andrew had executed a combination of subtle influence, calculated presence, and reactive management. Every step was aimed at maintaining composure while protecting reputation. But Bauer's footage would later reveal cracks. Micro-expressions that betrayed tension, brief hesitations that suggested awareness of observation, and interactions with Meghan that carried layers of implication. These details were not mistakes, they were human, but in the context of global scrutiny, they became explosive. The aftermath of the yacht encounter highlighted Andrew's reliance on discretion and strategic thinking. He communicated cautiously with advisors, assessing potential exposure and the possible impact of any emerging story. The presence of Meghan complicated matters, introducing variables beyond his control. He needed to manage not only his own reputation, but also the potential fallout from associations and interpretations that could reach the public. This is where Andrew's true role in the shadows becomes clear. He was not merely a passive participant. He was an active strategist navigating a high-stakes environment. He understood the rules of private influence, of controlled interaction, and of subtle power dynamics. Every glance toward Meghan, every controlled gesture, every measured step on the deck of that yacht was a calculated action in a complex psychological game. But even the most experienced strategist has limits. Andrew, despite decades of navigating controversy, could not predict every reaction, every observation, every eventual exposure. And as Bauer pieced together the footage, he realized just how much power he now wielded over Andrew's public image. It was a delicate balance between past experience and present vulnerability, a balance Andrew would soon have to confront directly. As the evening concluded and guests departed, Andrew's actions continued to ripple through the shadows. The yacht had returned to dock, but the implications remained. Every decision made, every subtle interaction captured, now formed a record that could be dissected at will. And Andrew, like Meghan, began to understand the magnitude of the situation. Their private world, carefully curated and controlled, had been pierced by an observer whose influence could not be ignored. The real question became, how would Andrew respond? Would he attempt to negotiate, to influence, to contain? Or would he act in ways that revealed desperation, panic, and vulnerability? The dynamics of the situation were shifting, and the choices he made in the days following the yacht encounter would be crucial. What happens when a secret you've spent years guarding suddenly becomes public? For Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, that question became a living nightmare the moment the yacht footage surfaced. The video, once private, now had a life of its own, and with it came the potential to unravel reputations, disrupt narratives, and ignite a media firestorm that neither royal could control. The leak didn't happen quietly. It started subtly, with whispers in elite circles. A few insiders, curious and cautious, began hinting that Bauer had obtained footage that was, quite literally, explosive. For months, Meghan and Andrew lived under the weight of this knowledge, aware that at any moment, the world could see them in an entirely new light. And when the footage finally broke through, the reaction was immediate, intense, and uncontrollable. The public release of the footage was strategic. Bauer knew the stakes and planned meticulously. It didn't appear on tabloid front pages overnight. Instead, clips surfaced in discreet channels, initially shared among investigative journalists and media insiders. The footage itself wasn't sensational in a traditional sense. No shouting matches, no scandalous overt acts. Its power came from nuance, subtle glances, fleeting touches, whispered exchanges, and the undeniable proximity of Meghan and Andrew at a private party, contradicting carefully curated public narratives. Social media erupted almost instantly. Platforms flooded with speculation, analysis, and debate. Every frame was scrutinized, every glance dissected. Hashtags began trending within hours, sparking discussions that ranged from curiosity to outrage. Public perception, once managed and polished, now became uncontrollable. For Meghan and Andrew, the moment the footage leaked was a turning point. It was no longer a question of private damage control. It was a battle for public perception. The footage revealed behaviors that were both subtle and telling. Meghan's movements on the yacht, while poised, showed signs of calculated awareness. Her eyes, scanning the deck and noting Andrew's presence, hinted at an understanding of the stakes. Andrew's gestures, seemingly casual, carried tension that suggested both awareness and strategy. These small, almost imperceptible actions became the story. And in the hands of the public and media, nuance can be explosive. Journalists and analysts dissected the clips endlessly. Who initiated interaction? Was there coordination? How long did they remain near each other? Even minor details, such as the angle of a head tilt or the positioning of a hand, were debated as evidence of deeper intentions. In the age of digital media, context often becomes narrative, and Bauer's footage provided a goldmine for interpretation. The leak had an immediate psychological impact on Meghan. The Duchess, known for her composed public persona, faced a new reality. She was being observed, judged, and dissected not for statements or interviews, but for behavior captured in a private setting. Panic set in. Her team scrambled to craft responses, manage narratives, and assess damage control strategies. Every move, every message, every potential leak became critical. She had to act, but each action carried risk, potentially adding fuel to the fire. Andrew's reaction, while different in style, mirrored the urgency of the situation. Decades of experience navigating public scrutiny gave him awareness, yet the footage represented a vulnerability that he had no full control over. His team mobilized quickly, reaching out to journalists, attempting to assess the scope of the leak, and preparing narratives to mitigate the fallout. Even for someone seasoned, this was a unique challenge. One that could not be managed through traditional PR channels alone. The leak also created immediate pressure among mutual acquaintances and insiders. People who had attended the yacht party suddenly faced scrutiny. What did they know? What did they notice? And what might they reveal? Allegiances were tested. Some remained silent, fearful of consequences. Others saw an opportunity to leverage their knowledge. And all the while, Bauer observed, understanding that the tension and uncertainty among participants amplified the impact of the footage itself. What made the footage so powerful wasn't scandalous acts. It was proof of connection. Meghan and Andrew, two high-profile figures, were captured in private, together, at an exclusive event, interacting subtly yet meaningfully. In isolation, the moments might seem trivial. But in context, with history, public perception, and media scrutiny layered on top, the implications were explosive. The world suddenly had questions that demanded answers, and Meghan and Andrew had no immediate ability to control the narrative fully. Public reaction was swift and polarized. Fans, critics, and casual observers debated intent and meaning. Social media became a courtroom, journalists became jurors, and the public demanded accountability. Every subtle movement on the footage was analyzed for intent, every interaction interpreted as strategic or conspiratorial. For Meghan and Andrew, the leak transformed private moments into public theater. And once the footage was out, there was no recalling it. The leak also intensified private communication between Meghan and Andrew. Messages, phone calls, and secret meetings multiplied as both sought to understand what had been exposed, how it might be used, and how to mitigate damage. But these moves, though secret, were themselves a form of evidence. Behavior in response to exposure often becomes as revealing as the original incident. Bauer understood this, observing reactions as carefully as he had captured the yacht interactions. Lawyers became involved, adding legal pressure to the already high-stakes situation. Threats of injunctions, non-disclosure agreements, and potential lawsuits were considered and sometimes deployed. But Bauer had anticipated these moves. His preparation ensured that any legal maneuvering would take time during which the narrative could evolve, spread, and embed itself in public consciousness. The leak had a momentum of its own, and legal strategies could slow it, but not stop it entirely. As the story unfolded, internal dynamics shifted. Meghan's advisors debated strategy, weighing the risks of public statements against silence. Andrew's team considered damage control measures, evaluating whether public acknowledgement, denial, or deflection was more effective. Both sides were operating in a high-pressure environment, with limited information and high stakes. Every decision could amplify the fallout. Every misstep could magnify exposure. Meanwhile, the public remained captivated. Analysts, journalists, and commentators dissected footage frame by frame, comparing it to known timelines, past behavior, and public statements. Conspiracy theories emerged. Speculation surged. The leak had transformed private interactions into global intrigue. And Meghan and Andrew, once confident in the invisibility of their actions, now faced a relentless public gaze. But perhaps the most critical aspect of the leak was its timing. Bauer's release coincided with a period when public interest in Meghan and Andrew was already heightened. Previous controversies, lingering rumors, and ongoing media attention created a perfect storm. The footage became the catalyst, intensifying scrutiny and ensuring that the story would not fade quietly. Timing amplified impact, and for Meghan and Andrew, it meant that the stakes were higher than ever before. The aftermath of the leak revealed one undeniable truth. Secrecy, once breached, is almost impossible to reclaim. Private actions, no matter how subtle, carry consequences when captured and analyzed. And for Meghan and Andrew, the leaked yacht footage was more than a story. It was proof of vulnerability, evidence of interaction, and a spark for public judgment. By the end of this chapter, the leak had shifted the balance of power. Bauer, in possession of both the footage and the understanding of its impact, held leverage. Meghan and Andrew were forced into reactive strategies, scrambling to protect images that could no longer be fully controlled. And as the public consumed, debated, and speculated, the story was far from over. When the leaked yacht footage went public, Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew faced a reality neither of them had fully anticipated: exposure they could not immediately control. And for people who have spent years curating every word, every gesture, and every public appearance, that reality is terrifying. The stakes weren't just reputational. They were personal, financial, and psychological. And in the shadow of Bauer's revelations, desperation began to emerge. It started subtly. Meghan, who had long maintained a composed and assertive public image, began reaching out in ways that revealed her concern. Private calls, discreet messages, and carefully worded emails were sent to intermediaries, friends, former staff, and mutual acquaintances with influence, seeking insight into the scope of Bauer's knowledge. Her tone was urgent, measured, yet tinged with an unmistakable panic. The Duchess, who had always appeared in control, was now reacting to forces she could not fully dictate. Andrew, on the other hand, approached the situation with a different strategy. His decades of experience navigating public scrutiny gave him a foundation for measured responses. But the leaked footage hit him in a way that was unavoidable. Evidence that could connect him to Meghan in a private, scrutinized setting was now circulating globally. He began contacting trusted aides and advisors, seeking guidance on how to contain the fallout. But even his experience could not erase the reality captured in Bauer's lens. Every glance, every subtle exchange, every brief interaction was now a public story, and Andrew's hand in controlling it was limited. The desperation escalated when Meghan and Andrew realized that Bauer was not only holding the footage, but also analyzing it meticulously. His reputation as a relentless investigator meant that the duo could not predict which frames, which gestures, or which interactions would be presented first. Every moment was a potential headline, a potential narrative shift. And that uncertainty fueled urgent, sometimes erratic, responses. This is where the begging began. Meghan reportedly reached out to Bauer indirectly, through intermediaries who could negotiate, influence, or even plead on her behalf. Her requests were a mixture of formal and informal appeals, some carefully worded, others tinged with anxiety. She offered cooperation, access, or insight in exchange for delay or discretion. The urgency of her messages revealed the gravity of her concern. The footage wasn't just embarrassing, it had the potential to challenge her entire public narrative. Andrew's approach mirrored hers in some ways, though shaped by his experience. He, too, sought ways to influence outcomes, attempting to appeal to discretion, trust, or even shared understanding. But his history with public controversy made the stakes particularly acute. Any perception of guilt, misjudgment, or complicity in private interactions could amplify media scrutiny. And so he moved cautiously, sometimes hesitating, sometimes pressing, but always aware that the clock was ticking. What's remarkable in this phase is the psychology of desperation. Both Meghan and Andrew were acting under intense pressure, aware that exposure was imminent. Human behavior under such conditions is telling. Micro-expressions, subtle slips in tone, and unguarded moments can all reveal more than words ever could. And while both sought control, Bauer, with his decades of investigative expertise, could anticipate their moves almost before they were made. The leaked footage created ripple effects beyond Meghan and Andrew. Advisors, intermediaries, and insiders found themselves in a high-stakes game of loyalty and influence. People who might have remained silent were now pressured, whether subtly or overtly, to provide information, mediate negotiations, or sway public narratives. And in such an environment, every decision carried risk. The wrong move could escalate exposure. The right move might offer temporary relief. But nothing could fully neutralize the threat of the footage. The desperation also manifested in the careful crafting of potential public responses. Meghan's team debated whether silence or statement would be more effective. Andrew's advisors considered the implications of acknowledgement versus denial. Every choice had consequences, and the pressure of global scrutiny magnified even minor decisions into potentially catastrophic outcomes. The leaked footage became not just evidence, it became a force shaping behavior, relationships, and strategy. Bauer's position was unique. Unlike a traditional journalist, he was not reacting in real time to leaks, spin, or PR strategies. He was observing, analyzing, and predicting. He understood the human element of desperation, the patterns of behavior that emerge when power is threatened. And in doing so, he effectively turned Meghan and Andrew's responses into part of the narrative itself. Their desperation, carefully documented and indirectly observed, became evidence of the stakes at hand. Meanwhile, the footage itself continued to circulate in controlled circles. Journalists, investigators, and trusted media insiders had access, and speculation began to build. Headlines were drafted in advance, analyses conducted, and the public appetite for revelation grew. Meghan and Andrew were acutely aware that the longer the footage remained in circulation, even in limited form, the greater the risk of uncontrolled exposure. Each day added pressure, each hour increased the stakes, and each subtle move they made could be interpreted as either strategy or panic. The tension reached a critical point when intermediaries reported back to Meghan and Andrew. Some negotiations yielded minor concessions, delayed release, vague assurances, and hints that discretion could be maintained temporarily. But these were temporary measures. Bauer's leverage remained intact. He controlled the narrative, and any delay did not erase the inevitability. The footage would eventually surface in full. And that inevitability created an environment where desperation, strategy, and fear collided. Psychologically, this phase is fascinating. Desperation often prompts behavior that can reveal as much as, or more than, the original evidence. Micro-gestures, subtle admissions, or even overcorrection can betray intentions and vulnerabilities. Bauer, analyzing Meghan and Andrew's responses, had effectively turned their own strategies into additional material. The leaked footage was just the beginning. The reactions it provoked were equally revealing. By the end of this period, Meghan and Andrew were operating under immense pressure. Every call, message, and negotiation carried weight. Every misstep could amplify exposure, and every strategic success offered only temporary relief. The game was no longer about controlling private actions. It was about managing perception, navigating global scrutiny, and anticipating the moves of a meticulous and relentless investigator. The stakes were about to escalate even further. Desperation, once private and calculated, would soon intersect with public exposure in a way that neither Meghan nor Andrew could fully predict. And when that intersection occurred, the consequences would ripple far beyond the yacht, far beyond private negotiation, and far beyond their control. When the leaked yacht footage hit the public consciousness, the storm it unleashed was unlike anything Meghan Markle or Prince Andrew had faced before. What had started as whispers in elite circles became headlines across continents. The footage was no longer a private concern. It had become a global story, dissected, debated, and sensationalized in ways neither could fully control. Within hours of the leak, media outlets scrambled to obtain copies, verify authenticity, and prepare coverage. Every frame, every glance, every subtle interaction became a subject for analysis. The footage wasn't explosive in the sense of scandalous actions. Its power came from implication. Meghan and Andrew had been caught together in a private space, interacting subtly yet meaningfully, in ways that contradicted the public narratives each had cultivated for years. And in a media landscape hungry for intrigue, nuance alone was enough to ignite a frenzy. Social media erupted almost immediately. Analysts, journalists, and armchair commentators alike dissected every second. Who initiated interactions? What did a fleeting touch mean? Were gestures coordinated, accidental, or intentional? Even minor details, like a smile or a glance, were debated and interpreted, creating a viral chain reaction. Public perception, once manageable, became uncontrollable. Every subtlety in the footage was amplified. Every nuance became a narrative, and Meghan and Andrew found themselves under a microscope with no escape. The global attention was relentless. In Europe, tabloids dissected the footage frame by frame. In North America, social media campaigns exploded with hashtags, memes, and opinion threads dissecting intentions. In Asia and the Middle East, news outlets speculated on implications, weaving the footage into broader stories about influence, secrecy, and royalty. For Meghan and